Well, what did you think?
Well, I thought both matches, everybody worked very hard. I thought that
everyone's going to work hard.
Sure.
It's that goes without saying. The to me, like, I was watching it, and one of the things that popped into my head was it felt very, very different. And there are good things and there are bad things about the changes.
I'm going to tell you why very quickly.
And some of it is also, I mean, some of it is just stylistic changes in wrestling. You know, wrestling is very, very different. Because I was thinking back to the first Wargames, which was 35 plus years ago, in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was a sensational match. And because it was such a sensational match, it became a cornerstone of WCW, and then a million independent groups did it, and TNA did it but couldn't use the name Wargames, so they had to use the name Lethal Lockdown because WWE owned the name. Then WWE lost the ownership of the name to MLW and had to buy it back and own it again. And but it's Dusty. They credited the thing to Dusty, and it was his original idea, and there's the differences. I mean, the two obvious differences are there's no top to the cage now, and I mean, it's just the rules wise that you can win by pin, whereas the original you had to win by submission or surrender, and that the original 5-minute period is the same, but they extend the alternate periods from 2 minutes to 3 minutes, which means instead of, I believe it was 21 minutes before Let the War Games Begin happens, and now it's supposed to be 29 minutes. It's actually a little less because they actually shaved time, but it's still it was still over 28 minutes. So those were the rules differences. But and there's other differences that are differences based on booking and differences based on style. But as far as the rules differences, what are your thoughts on those?
Well, what I want to get to here is so in the women's war game, there was a reason I mentioned that everybody worked hard, and that is because I watched that women's war games match, and they're doing these crazy spots. There's moonsaults off the cage and everything like that. But as I'm watching it, the question that kept coming to my mind was, what is the story of this match? The story of the match was there are two teams that are in a War Games match. And that was it.
The story of the match was that we want a highlight reel.
Sure,
that was the
exactly.
Story of the match. That was the
but there
story of the match.
there was no these two. I mean, these two factions were feuding, but it was nothing like.
They created a feud.
There's a rivalry, but it wasn't like this is a blood feud. It's very important who wins. There are important stakes here. There's a lot of. It was just kind of here's two teams that don't like each other, and now they're doing a bunch of spots in the cage. And Becky made a return, who wasn't even involved in this feud at all, by the way, and she got the big win at the end. And then it was over, and it was kind of like, okay, well, yeah, they did a women's War Games match and got clips.
Okay, well, but the thing is that in the old War Games, especially after the first couple of years, it was just like, hey, we're going to do a War Games, and a lot of the times there was no repercussions and there was no stakes, and it wasn't like a winner gets a championship match. It was just
and those were memorable, legendary War Games matches. That's kind of the point here.
It was 5 baby faces and 5 heels at the time. Sometimes they were units and sometimes they were not units. They were thrown together. Sometimes the matches were great. Sometimes the matches weren't great. So, I mean, that's not new. I mean, the original was the top 5 baby faces, the top 5 heels, or really the top 4, and then they threw managers in originally. But, so it's the two, essentially a big babyface faction with all the top stars and a big heel faction with all the top stars put together in this unique match. And, I guess like then you did blood, now you do weapons. They didn't do weapons then. That was, it did have more of a violent feel before and more of a dangerous feel before.
Well, yeah, they allowed blood, and nowadays there's no blood, and so it's all about, well, somebody's going to come into the cage, and they're going to put some weapons in there, and we're going to hit each other with cans, and we're going to do some table spots, and that's the modern-day version of violence, but it doesn't feel like anything that you would not see in a normal match.
Yeah, that was my thing.
You've got no DQs.
When I'm watching it, we see a million no DQ matches, but then again, before, when they would have the War Games and you saw the blood, the fact is that they were doing blood in main events 6 nights a week back then too. So it's not like the blood was anything new. What was new was it was just the concept of a different cage than the normal cage, and cages drew because in those days the cage was a blow off and you had a winner and a loser and nobody interfered. And hey, at least the one thing we could say is nobody interfered tonight in the War Games.
No. And my comment about the main event is, and I want to say something here for a minute, because I know I already know what some people are going to say. To me, when you do War Games and the babyface have the advantage, it's stupid. And I know people are going to say, well, it's 2022 and people have seen that shit forever, blah, blah, blah. And listen, I'm sure to a degree, a lot of fans probably don't care, but there is a reason that the heels always got the advantage, and that is because it's a simple story.
The psychology
it's one-on-one. Yep, and then it's two-on-one.
Totally sucked in that match.
Yes, it's one-on-one, and then a heel comes in, so the babyface are outnumbered, and then a babyface has to make a save and a comeback, and then they're outnumbered again. It's okay. So all that aside, the one I heard tonight was, well, Brian, you may be right, but you realize that Sami Zayn, the story is about Sami Zayn, and he's essentially a babyface, and everybody loves. And
everyone's a babyface, though. I mean, Roman Reigns.
That's true,
is a babyface.
but here is the problem with that. Okay, that is correct, but here is the issue to me with that match tonight. What in God's name did any of the babyfaces get out of this match? What did Drew McIntyre get out of this match? What did the Brawling Brutes? What did Sheamus get out of this match? Well, no. Here, listen.
I mean, Sami
Zayn thing at the end. The Sami Zayn thing. I thought the stuff they did at the end was awesome. I loved what they did at the end of the match. Okay,
but that was the whole match.
But the way that they structured this match, where the heels were disadvantaged the entire time, they still overcame the odds. They still won in the end. Nobody turned to cause the babyface to lose the match. They just got beaten in this thing here. And remember how hot Sheamus was after the match with Gunther? And then, Drew McIntyre was hot going into that Clash at the Castle. And I watched the show at the end, and it's like, these guys are just guys. They're just guys right now. And I feel that you don't want to do a War Games match, put top baby faces in there, and do a storyline built around the heel faction, which gets them over. But then when it's over, it's like, okay, well, does anyone want to see Sheamus versus Roman Reigns? Does anybody want to see Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns? We have no challenger for Roman Reigns in the foreseeable future.
Kevin Owens.
Maybe. He got beat. They'll find a way to get him a championship match. But
he got beat, but he had Roman Reigns beat with the stunner.
Yeah, but nobody thinks he's beaten Roman Reigns. Like, everybody knows there's a build to the tag match where they win the tag titles.
Nobody thinks anyone's beating Roman Reigns. Okay, that one of the issues. Okay, so the thing with the War Games, and it's why they probably did it this way, is because it's okay, the match from a psychology standpoint, as far as like the gist of the match, it made no sense at all. Because, yes, the heels were the ones disadvantaged, so the psychology was all whacked out. Okay, so I'm watching the whole match, and it's just like, this is just awkward, and you have to do these things where, you have to injure a heel, so, or injure a babyface, I should say, because, yeah, they're like Butch and things like that. So you can sort of make them look like they're shorthanded, even though they actually always have the man advantage. So that didn't, as far as like the length for most of the match, it didn't work. The finish, what built to the finish was fine. But the other aspect of all of this is that because, they did the war, it was a different mentality. Back then, you did one War Games in a city a year, and so for the first couple of years, it was the coin flip thing, and the heels always won the coin flip because the match only makes sense when the heels win the coin flip. Well, now you're doing these things of the fight for the man advantage, and because you do that, you kind of have to not always have the baby faces lose. So this was one of those instances where he just picked, like, we can't always do the same thing, except the match only really works the way it's supposed to when you do that. So you kind of had, it's kind of like one of those things where, and again, I think 2 War Games on the same show, okay, you have to do it this way because women's wrestling is important now, whereas back then it was not important. You couldn't, they wouldn't even have enough women on a roster to do a War Games, realistically. They didn't even have women on the regular women wrestlers on the roster in the 80s. And, they might bring women in for a week or two, but they didn't even really have women on the roster. So because you do that, the 2 War Games on the same show, to me, you get, I feel like it removes the specialness of the match because you have 2 of them on the same show. But that's what it's going to be. That's just the nature of the beast. So it's one of the drawbacks. But the thing I felt watching both matches.
Well, let me make one other comment before you do that. Let me make one other comment. So 2 things also on the psychology. If you want to do the baby faces have the advantage, and however you do it, it actually works. Where every time the baby faces hit the ring, there's like a giant pop and everything like that. Then I'll say like fine, it worked. But you could watch the match, and these baby faces were heading to the ring, and the crowd was just like, well, here comes the next guy. There was no excitement. There were no big pops. They just came to the ring. And on that note, by the way, when you were talking about the intervals where, you'd have 5 minutes, and then it'd be 2 minutes, next guy, 2 minutes, next guy, 2 minutes, next guy. That's more effective because the whole point is you only have 2 minutes. Like, the heels beat on the babyface for 2 minutes. It's not enough time for you to get sick of it. Like, you're getting excited because, oh, man, another guy's coming in. Another guy's coming in. And you're counting down the clock. The babyface comes in, and he only has 2 minutes. So, again, it's not like he has to run wild for 3 minutes, which is a long time, by the way. I mean, that can get redundant. Then he gets to get cut off, and then he's got to run wild again. 2 minutes is better for the heat portion leading to the comeback, leading to the heat, leading to the comeback. Stretching that out over 3 minutes, it just drags everything out, and the entire thing is less effective.
100% agreed. And that, it's funny because when I was watching the women's match, this is where all of the thing of like comparing it to the past and everything, which I hate to do, except it became natural because what happened was I remember watching those War Games and it was constant excitement. I mean, it was about a 25-minute match, maybe a little, 25 minutes usually, and constant excitement for 25 minutes, the place going nuts. And I'm watching this women's match and it feels like they are stretching. And they are trying to they're just like before, guys with the 2-minute intervals, it doesn't feel like you're filling time. In this one, it felt like every segment was just filling time, and we're filling time until we get to 29 minutes, and then everybody's in. And
well, yes, and the excitement part of it is, in the old days, the excitement would be created by the psychology, whereas nowadays, the excitement has to be created by doing exciting things. You have to do a big flip off the cage. You have to do some table spot. That's what creates excitement nowadays, whereas if you had shorter intervals, the whole excitement is, here comes somebody. By the time the guy gets to the ring, you've got 90 seconds, and there's a quick comeback and whatever, and then here comes some heel. And they beat down everybody, and you're all excited to see the next. That's how you created the excitement with psychology. You didn't need to do as much. I mean, when you're comparing nowadays to back then, I mean, the athleticism is way higher today. I mean, the stuff that they do, if you're in crazy spots and all of that.
Okay. There was really good athleticism in the women's match, but in the men's match, the athleticism was better 35 years ago because you had bigger guys that were doing more things. This was just guys. I mean, this was just guys basically stalling for time until you had that big climax that they set up. I mean, this was the men's match was all built to the story at the end, and the match was just filler. Back then, I mean, they used the 2 rings better. They were, the idea of the bigger guys, and they were running around and they were doing crazier things. I mean, they were doing, which is funny because wrestling is so much more athletic now, but the athleticism in the men's War Games was not as good as the match 35 years ago, the first one that I saw. Not even close.
Well, let's review this show. I did not see the pre-show, so take us through